So again, welcome everyone to Towson University, to this wonderful lecture by Karen Klinedinst that is related to the landscape photo exhibition of Norwegian and American 19th century photography on view in the Center for the Arts Gallery at Towson University, but it's also virtually on view at the Center for the Arts Gallery website, Towson University. So I hope that you will take advantage of looking at that as well. So welcome, Karen, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, actually, all of a sudden oh, okay. Thank you, Susan, for inviting me to give this lecture today. We talked about this, you invited me about a little over a year ago, so a lot has happened since we first talked, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to do this over Zoom because so many other people are able to attend. So I'm going to just get started here. So in order to talk about the influences on my work, I should probably go back and show you where it all started. I was born and grew up in central Pennsylvania to two musicians and educators. And I've always been so thankful to my parents for recognizing my artistic talents and helping me to develop them by sending me to Casmaret's art classes. Every Saturday morning, I would go to Cass's studio where she would then give private art lessons to a small group of kids. And we would draw from still life setups and paint from reference photos. And sometimes we would go out in the field, but it was always with her guidance and encouragement. And it was always the highlight of my week. When I graduated from high school, my parents gave me a camera as my graduation gift. And it was my first real camera, and it was a completely manual Minolta with a 45mm lens, and it really changed my life. The summer before I moved to Baltimore to attend the Maryland Institute College of Art, I took a photography class and I learned some basic photo and darkroom skills. And it was then that I fell in love with the magic of photography. I love how the camera sees things that the human eye can't, and I love the ability to capture a moment in time. And the experience of watching my image slowly reveal itself in the darkroom's developer tray was really magical. In the early 80s, I moved to Baltimore to attend the Maryland Institute College of Art. And I was a graphic design major, but I also took as many photography classes as I could. And I realized immediately after I graduated and got my first job as a graphic designer that photography would remain central to how I express myself artistically. A very early influence on my work was Emmett Gowan's series of portraits of his wife Edith and her tight-knit family. And I've always been drawn to the intimacy he was able to capture in these portraits. During college and after I graduated, I created a series of family portraits of the oldest generation of my family. I was really shy in my 20s, so I was most comfortable photographing the people I was emotionally connected to. This is my great aunt Eleanor, and she was my mother's aunt. She was also a librarian for the Milton Hershey School for Boys. She was an artist and an avid traveler. She was a strong, independent woman, and she was one of my role models. And this is another photograph of Eleanor. And I took these photographs when she had just moved into an assisted living facility. And this is an image of my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and she was also a very important person in my life. She made sure that when my Cass Moret, who was my art teacher, had to move from her studio, she made sure that those art lessons for kids continued in her basement of her house. After the end of the family portrait project, I wasn't quite sure where I would go creatively, but my husband, who's also an artist, suggested I consider the landscape because of my love of hiking and the natural world. But because of my preconceived ideas of the photographic landscape, initially I wasn't really open to the idea. But once I gave myself permission to explore the landscape, I went back and I took a look at how the landscape was expressed both photographically and in painting. This led me to the romantic landscapes of the Hudson River School painters. Although my medium of choice is the immediacy of photography and the camera's ability to capture what can't be seen, the romantic landscape painters were able to add the emotion and poetry of place that I was drawn to. So how could the romantic landscape be relevant now? This was a question that I often asked myself as I first started exploring the photographic landscape. Could I really create something that was beyond the sentimental and that had some emotional connection? The Romantic and Hudson River School movement in art and literature was a response to the rapidly disappearing American wilderness due to industrialization in the early 1800s. Thomas Cole helped American painting find a new direction in the first third of the 19th century. Unabashedly a romanticist, he saw both an aesthetic and a spiritual value to the American landscape. As the land was cultivated and wilderness settled, artists tried to come to terms with the pros and cons of progress. Thomas Cole, Frederick Church, Asher Brown Durand, and Charles Innes focused on the emotional and spiritual found in the idealized, unspoiled American landscape that really, in some ways, didn't quite really exist. Trees are often featured prominently in these paintings, and these optimistic trees are symbols of heroic American monuments. They're natural versions of the ancient cultural monuments and ruins that were often featured in European historical and romantic landscapes. Much like the 19th century, we are at another crossroad, the impact of climate change on our planet and remaining wilderness. The romantic landscape goes hand in hand with interest in the environment. The Hudson River School artists thought not only that art should truthfully represent nature, but their landscape should also reflect artists' emotional responses to the beauty of nature through the use of light and their composition. That's a big difference between the heyday of the Hudson River School and today. Then nature was something to be either revered or conquered. Today, nature and the environment is endangered by climate change. There is a power to the beauty of nature. It has the power to move you emotionally and then power to inspire you to take action. And during this unsettling times of the past year, many of us have turned to the beauty of nature as a salvage or a refuge. Asher Brown Durand was another prominent painter of the Hudson River School, and this painting, Kindred Spirits, is a tribute to Thomas Cole upon his death in 1848. The painting depicts Cole with his sketchbook and recorder standing on a stone outcropping with poet and critic William Cullen Bryant, who was also a close friend of Cole's. The landscape around them is based on that of Catterkill's Clove, which is a gorge in the Catskill Mountains of New York. And if you visit Catterkill's Clove today, this landscape is a little changed. In 2004, I was awarded an artist residency at the Platte Clove Nature Preserve by the Catskill Conservation Center. For a week, I lived and worked in a rustic red cabin located atop of a box canyon waterfall, surrounded by more than 200 acres of hiking trails and old growth forest. And I was really in my element there. I spent my days creating work in the same location that inspired Durand and Thomas Cole. And while there, I really understood the power of beauty and why the Hudson River School painters were reacting to the rapidly disappearing wilderness. During my residency, I created a series of small, intimate landscapes printed on watercolor paper using the Polaroid transfer process with added pastel. And these are really small prints. The image area is about 3.5 by 4.5, and they were printed on 8.5 by 8 by 10 pieces of watercolor paper. So they're very small and intimate. So I've returned to the birthplace of Hudson River School many times since my 2004 residency. And every time I'm there, I'm deeply moved by the power of this place. And it makes me realize, the power that landscape had on the Hudson River School painters. A couple of years ago, I returned to Platte Clove for the first time since my residency in 2004. And my creative process is quite different now than it was in 2004, but I still seek to capture the emotional quality of this place that inspired Durand and Thomas Cole. On one of my recent trips to the Catskills, I visited Olana, which is the estate of Frederick Church that sits on a hill overlooking the Hudson River in the village of Hudson, New York. It's a pretty remarkable place. Church designed both the house that sits on the hill and the grounds surrounding it. And Church suffered from rheumatoid arthritis later in his painting career. And so he then turned to his creative energies to landscape architecture. Olana's 250-acre naturalistic landscape is one of Frederick Church's great works of art, and it exists today as one of the most intact artist-designed landscapes in the US. So I'm going to show you now a couple other bodies of work, and this next body of work is titled Keating Summit. So my emotional and spiritual connection to place is most evident in my landscapes of Keating Summit. My uncle has owned 800 acres of land among the hills of Potter County in northern Pennsylvania for over 50 years. I took my first steps on the porch of the farmhouse that sits on the property. I have a deep connection to this place and the landscape, and it's really part of my DNA. More than any other place, the landscape of Keating Summit has inspired me. I've been photographing Keating Summit for over 30 years, and the work represents how I've evolved as an artist over time. 30 years ago, I was photographing my husband in the landscape with my first camera. And then I was exploring the landscape with my medium format camera in black and white film. So from about, I'd say 1998 to 2008, my images were photographed using color transparency film and printed on watercolor paper using the Polaroid transfer process. And I would go back and do a little enhancing and embellishing with pastel. And this is titled Blue Moon. This is one of my first Polaroid transfers, and when you peel the negative from the watercolor paper, the darkest areas of the print would sometimes lift off. And I always love like a good happy accident, and I always would welcome some of the lift off. But as I perfected the process, the happy accidents were a little harder to come by. And this is a later Polaroid transfer. It's titled Summer Fern. And you're going to see this tree featured prominently in a later image. And this is titled To the Lake. And this is titled The Hollow. And there's an old forgotten apple orchard in the hollow that you're going to also see again in later work. And this is titled Winter in the Hollow. So since 2011, I've been capturing this place with either my iPhone or my mirrorless Olympus camera. And I'm layering the digital images with added texture and color to create a neo-romantic world based on my memory. And this is I keep going back to certain parts of the places on the property, and this is sort of the that little stand of birch trees are sort of the demarcation of the edge of my uncle's property. Our family always calls this the lake, but it's really a large pond, and this view is so ingrained in my memory. When we visit, it's the first thing I do. The first thing I do when we get there is to walk like a half a mile from the house to the lake. And when we leave, I always walk to the lake to say goodbye. And this lake is just so timeless, and it's just very ingrained in my memory. And this is titled The Golden Tree. And this tree has been featured prominently in several of my images over the years. And sadly, I've also seen this tree decline over the years. And I'm afraid that the next time I go there, that tree might not be around too much longer. It's really kind of a dead tree now. It's a little sad. In the summer, the fog settles into the hollow almost every night, and it lifts sometimes in the morning. And that is my favorite time to be there, early in the morning as that fog lifts. This is titled The Rising Moon. There's a series of extensive beaver ponds on the property, and I've been watching them evolve over time. They've become pretty elaborate. It's the beauty of being able to explore a place over a long period of time is just to see the subtle changes. And this is titled Late Winter, the Beaver Pond. And this is titled In the Early Morning. And these are the same, this is the same little forgotten orchard that appeared in a previous Polaroid transfer. This is titled The Forgotten Orchard. And this tree I've photographed many times. And this is titled The Awakening. And this is a fairly recent image, and I photographed that this summer when we were able to go there and get out of Baltimore, and it was this place just is so such a refuge, especially in the last year. So over the years, I keep returning to Keating Summit, and I really can't imagine not photographing this place. It's the landscape that has been a constant in my life. And as my creative process changes, it really allows me to see this familiar landscape anew. So in 2011, I was feeling creatively blocked. In 2008, Polaroid stopped making film, and suddenly the photo process that I used to create image transfers was no longer possible. I finally purchased a digital camera, and I started creating images that were really not inspiring me. So in order to break out of my creative block, I decided to take a workshop at the Center for Photography at Woodstock. And I saw a listing on their website for iPhone artistry with Dan Burkholder. And I had never considered using the camera on my iPhone for anything other than, snapshots and photos of my cats. But I took a look at Dan's website and decided to take the workshop. And that workshop completely opened me up to the incredible creative tool that I always had with me. So after taking Dan Burkholder's workshop, I went on a trip to Cornwall and decided to use my iPhone exclusively to photograph the landscape. And that trip and this particular image really changed my creative approach and how I expressed the landscape. So this is my the next body of work I want to show you, entitled the Emotional Landscape. So after Dan's workshop and my trip to Cornwall, I really explored how I could use my iPhone to express the landscape. The iPhone's camera allowed me to travel lightly, and using my iPhone and iPad to process and layer my images really freed me up creatively. Um, the process gave me the freedom and the inspiration that working strictly with my digital camera did not. Over time, I created a body of work titled The Emotional Landscape. And this series of romantic landscapes explores my idealized memories of certain places in my life. In the Emotional Landscape series, I capture my deep connection to the natural landscape. And they're inspired by the Hudson River School. And I interpret the landscape and how it affects me emotionally and spiritually. My approach is not about capturing reality, but creating a neo-romantic world reflective of my memory. I do not, in the series, I don't include any figures in my landscapes, but trees feature really prominently, and they've become a symbol of our relationship with nature. This is titled Shenandoah Spring. And I've always been attracted to these two lone trees in a field on the eastern shore. And I've photographed them several times over the years, and I've really seen them change over time. And here they are again. And at one time, when I first photographed these trees, they were not touching, but now over time they're touching. So Dolly Sods is another landscape that I have a lot of attachment to, and it's on a high plateau in West Virginia, and it gets lots of weather from the west, and it's a microclimate with alpine vegetation normally seen in Canada. And it's a landscape and environment that has been greatly impacted and altered by man. And over 100 years ago, a forest fire burned through the peak. And as a result, there are vast stretches of open meadows. And the trees that have grown since are stunted by the harsh environment. In 2016, I was invited to create a body of work at the Towson National Wildlife Center outside Washington, D.C. And I spent a year photographing this place, and I really developed a connection to it. And it's just a little pocket of wilderness, so close to an urban environment. Since I grew up in Pennsylvania, I've always been drawn to the mountains and rolling hills. But since my move to Maryland, I've connected to the marshes that are an intersection between land and water. This is titled Solstice. Adkins Arboretum on the Eastern Shore has been really an inspiration to me over the years, and I've been photographing it for quite a long time, and I'm just very attracted to this really quiet, timeless landscape. And this is the Tuckahoe Creek. And I found this tree off trail at Adkins Arboretum, probably about like 5 or 6 years ago. And I recently tried to find it again, but it's been entirely absorbed into the forest floor. And this is titled The Resurrection. And this is titled The Secret Forest. And this is photographed not too far from Baltimore in this one in a really beautiful river gorge, Gunpowder Falls. And it's a place I go to time and time again. And this is titled The Passing Clouds. So the Emotional Landscape series was exhibited at the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, Massachusetts in 2018. And I'd like to thank the executive director, Paula Tagliarelli, for asking me to show this body of work at the Griffin. And the Griffin Museum is dedicated solely to the art of photography. And Paula is just such a wonderful support for so many photographers. While doing some research on the Hudson River School, I discovered the landscapes of Susie M. Barstow. And Barstow was born in 1836, and she taught at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences. And she exhibited her work from 1858 to 1895, but her work remained relatively little known until art historians began to reassess women artists of the Hudson River School. Her work was included in the 2010 survey exhibition, Remember the Ladies, Women of the Hudson River School at the Thomas Cole National Historic Site in Catskill, New York, and the 2019 exhibition, The Color of the Moon, Lunar Painting in American Art at the Hudson River Museum in Yonkers, New York. And her work was featured alongside works by Thomas Cole, Albert Bierstadt, and George Inness. And Barstow's painting Night in the Woods is on the far right. And this is a closer look at Night in the Woods. What was interesting to me was that Barstow was an early member of the Appalachian Mountain Club and an avid hiker. The Appalachian Mountain Club was formed in 1876 during the pinnacle of nature spiritualism. It's the oldest national outdoors club, and after its second meeting in 1876, women were accepted and many became renowned female hikers. Barstow climbed all the principal peaks in the Catskills, White Mountains, and the Adirondacks, plus the Alps and the Black Forest in Europe. And legend has it that she could hike 25 miles per day. And she often went on expeditions along the Hudson River and the mountains that combined hiking with sketching and painting. Women's dress of the area was impractical for hiking, so Barstow designed hiking clothes that included sturdy boots and shortened skirts paired with trousers. So I'm so thankful that I would never have to wear a skirt while hiking. I consider Barstow a role model and an inspiration. Hiking was an integral part of her creative process. She sketched in the field during her hikes and later used these sketches as bases for paintings that she then finished in the studio. Her expression of the landscape was inspired by her experience of hiking in the mountains. So I utilize a similar approach in the next series of landscapes photographed in the Western US. Hiking is an integral part of my creative process and it forms my point of view. The act of hiking allows me to experience and express nuances of light, time, and weather. So all of the landscapes in the Walking West series were captured during my hiking trips in California, Arizona, and Colorado. And this was photographed in the High Sierras in California. Being from the Mid-Atlantic, these are landscapes that always feel really foreign to me, yet while I'm there, I'm always searching for familiar in these faraway places. And it sort of makes the far away feel closer to home. And I created richly layered landscapes that blend the real with the imagined and the familiar with the unknown. And this is titled Day's End, and this was photographed at Olmsted Point in Yosemite National Park. And this was also photographed in California. Several years ago, I visited the deserts of Arizona for the first time, and it was the most foreign landscape I've ever experienced, and it was so different from the Mid-Atlantic. And I'm really looking forward to getting back there when we cannot travel again. While in Arizona, I was really attracted to the saguaros because they have a human-like quality about them, and they just remind me of trees. And the mesquite tree also reminded me of the old apple trees on my uncle's property at Keating Summit. And this is titled Morning Mesquite. And this is some work from my trips to Colorado. The lone tree growing in an inhospitable environment is always one that I'm really drawn to, and I always feel like it's a symbol of survival. And this was photographed in Colorado as well. So the next body of work is titled Dreams. And the Title Dream series explores the concept of wilderness in the urban environment. And this series is inspired by the Hudson River School's romantic landscapes of disappearing wilderness. And with this series, I'm giving reverence to the small pockets of wilderness that remain. Title Dreams was photographed at Black Marsh Natural Area, just 13 miles east of downtown Baltimore, on property once owned by the Bethlehem Steel Company. The property was used as a hunting preserve for the steel company's executives. And for almost a century, the Bethlehem Steel Company was one of Baltimore's biggest employers, but it was also one of the northern Chesapeake Bay's biggest polluters. Yet they were really good stewards of that particular place. And when Bethlehem Steel closed, they sold the property to the state of Maryland, and it's now part of North Point State Park. And I would say that winter is probably my favorite time to be there. There's a solitude there that just can't be rivaled any other time of year. And I also love in the winter that you can see where all the other inhabitants of that place have been traveling. And the series include three, I call them trilogies because they're three separate images that work together. And this is titled Winter Sonata. And then this is each individual piece of the trilogy, Winter Sonata. Black Marsh Natural Area is considered one of the finest examples of a tidal marsh on the upper Chesapeake Bay, despite its proximity to an industrial urban environment. And there really is less than a half a mile away, there is encroaching development on this piece of property, but it is protected. And this is another one of the trilogies in the series, and this is titled Rites of Spring. And these are the individual parts of the trilogy. And this is titled Shelter. And I've been photographing here for a couple of years now, I think about 3 years. And this tree or remnant of a tree is actually no longer, I can no longer find it. It's, I think, part of the marsh now. And this is titled Late Day, Late August. And I actually found out about Black Marsh through the birding community. Actually, some social media posts from the Baltimore's birding community, and I just couldn't believe that it was this incredible place was so close to the city. When you enter Black Marsh, it feels like you've walked into this magical, dreamlike world, and the surrounding urban environment melts away. And during the pandemic, the beauty of this natural landscape has really provided a refuge from the uncertain times. And this is the third trilogy in the series, and it's titled the Egret Trilogy. And each part of the Egret Trilogy has its own title, and this is titled The Scout, The Congregation, and The Hunter. This is titled All That Remains. And this is titled The Edge of Day. So I created these richly layered landscapes that blur the lines between fantasy and reality. And I printed them on translucent vellum and backed them with white gold or silver leaf. And it sort of gives these small, intimate prints dimension, luminosity, and a little bit of magic. And I wanted to create these like little treasures because that place is such a little treasure. And it also takes me back to my sort of my small prints from my Polaroid transfer days. And this is what the work looks like when it was exhibited at Project 1628 in Bolton Hill in Baltimore in 2019. So they are small prints. And this is the Egret Trilogy together. So recently I've been working on some urban landscapes. So what have I been doing in the past year? During the lockdown and travel restrictions due to the pandemic, I've been really walking daily through Baltimore's urban parks, and I've been discovering little small pockets of wilderness. So I'm working on a new series called The Wilderness Within, and it's sort of exploring the intersection of Baltimore's urban and natural environment. And this new body of work is in progress. And this is titled Sunday in the Park, and it's photographed in Wyman Park, which is very close to my house. And this particular spot, I always feel like it's a portal to another time and place. And this is titled Tender Signs, and right behind those trees is actually the Johns Hopkins Homewood campus. And this was also photographed in Wyman Park. And Wyman Park was actually designed by the Frederick Law Olmsted and his sons. And it really utilizes the natural topographic features of the landscape. And this is also my little homage to Bruegel. And this is titled The Edge of Nowhere. And this was photographed in North Point State Park. But this is an area where there's a lot of construction ruins that are and debris that are washed up on the shore. So to me, this image really is that the intersection really of the urban and the natural environment. And there's concrete that's washing up, brick, and this tree is just pretty. This tree really truly is a survivor. So I want to thank all of you for seeing my work this evening, and I hope you have some questions for me. And thank you very much, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you. People want to type some questions into the chat. Hope you know how to do that.
Would you like me to stop share, Susan?
It's nice to keep the image up or an image up, so
Sure.
we'll do that. Okay. One question is, do you use Photoshop or how do you layer?
I've been working actually lately with Photoshop on my iPad, but I've also worked with a lot of iOS apps on my iPad as well. I really love the freedom of working not on my computer, but on my iPad.
How much of the texture is done before printing versus after printing?
I apply a lot. I do apply texture. It's sort of goes hand in hand. Some of the texture is created by the textures that I add, and then some of the textures due to the printing process, and either the paper that I'm using, or in the case of the vellum prints, the gilding that I'm doing.
And what kind of printer do you use for your prints on vellum?
I use a Epson P800. So I do all my own printing, except for my large work. I don't print myself, but I print up to 17 by 22.
And there's a comment that the bridge in the snow in Wyman Park is stunning. I don't know if you can get back to that photo.
Yeah. I am always attracted to that little spot. The Friends of Stony Run built a bridge there, a pedestrian bridge. So now I have this vantage point of being able to see this the University Boulevard Bridge, and then you can just go right into the park, and it's just, I don't know, I just always find it sort of like a portal, and it's magical, especially that day when it was snowing. And thankfully that person was that is in that archway or under the bridge, they were taking a photograph. So I took a photograph of somebody taking a photograph.
As travel resumes, are there places overseas where you'll look for your next inspiration? What locations are on your wish list?
Well, I was supposed to go to Romania, to the mountains of Romania last year. So of course we couldn't do that. So I'm hoping that I can get to take that trip in December.
Is there an emotional difference for you between analog and digital work? Would you return to film?
Possibly, although I really, there's just, I don't know, I've really been enjoying all the, when I finally realized that I could just layer images and use that image capture as sort of a launching pad for creating like something like another piece of art. I'm not sure whether I would go back to film, although it tempts me.
And explain why an iPhone worked better than a digital camera for you.
All I needed, and I don't want to get hung up so much on that it's an iPhone, but I think what it did, it was just broke me free. When I was using the digital camera initially, it was just I wasn't feeling really inspired. I wasn't getting that same inspiration that I did when I was doing alternative processes and the polar transfer. So I think the iPhone just sort of like broke me free of some of the preconceived ideas I had about using a digital camera. So it kind of made me free to do some layering and adding textures, and not being as, being less technical about the image.
Do you ever photograph the same composition not just the same place over at a period of time, especially with places like the Keating property?
Oh, yes. I mean, sometimes I realize, oh my God, how many times have I photographed this? But yeah, I mean, because I mean, you get attracted to, you know, certain things. But also the nice thing about exploring a place over a long period of time is you can sort of break free of, you know, the usual things that you are attracted to and try to get go deeper into that place.
Someone asked if you could explain again how you mount the prints output on vellum. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so do you want me to, I can go back to that little video clip. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
So so this is so I'm printing on this translucent piece of vellum, and on the back of the vellum, going to I apply gilding. So it's gold leaf. And you have to put a sizing down because it has to, you know, it's an adhesive that so that the vellum is, you know, sticks to the back. And then they're varnished both on the front and the back. So they're translucent, and but they're also, there's this luminosity that's created because of that, of the layer of the gilding.
Would you ever consider using the Polaroid transfer process again now that the Impossible project is manufacturing Polaroid film? Or do you feel your work has evolved beyond that process?
That's a good question. I actually have I have like 2 boxes left of Polaroid film that are in my freezer. So I should use them. But I don't know, I think in a way I've moved on. And you know, that's the wonderful thing about the creative process. It just, you move on to different things, and sometimes you just don't want to go back.
Do you work in the darkroom anymore?
No, I don't. I've been working digitally for a while now, so I kind of like it.
Thanks for sharing your vision. There is an affection and intimacy in your work that is clearly communicated to the viewer.
Oh, thank you.
Do you meditate in the location you are photographing before you shoot, such as forest bathing to connect with the landscape, or other techniques you use to connect?
Well, I always consider, I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person, and I hike at least once a week, and I consider that my church. So I consider that I consider, you know, when I'm walking, that's sort of a walking meditation. So yes.
Mhm.
And I also think that the camera allows me to really see things more deeply in a way.
Do you ever conduct workshops or post-processing or individual training?
I do. And actually, I'm teaching a workshop through the Griffin Museum of Photography right now.
So do you post that on your website,
I do.
Karen?
Mhm.
So if people go to your website, they'll be able to find out
Yeah,
about that.
and I'd like to yes, there's like a little workshop section of my website.
Have you ever used Topaz or Luminar softwares?
No, I haven't. I do a lot with Photoshop and also some other iOS apps.
There's a shout out from Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill fans, Wendy, Barbara, and Lynn.
Oh, that's nice that they were able to come.
What was the name of the church estate?
Oh, Lana.
Lana, yes. Y'all can visit there someday again.
It's definitely worth a visit if you ever get the opportunity.
Can you discuss how Dan Burkholder or other instructors influenced you?
Oh, Dan has been, I mean, since I took that workshop with Dan in 2011, he's, you know, become a mentor and a friend. And I don't know, he just gave me the sort of the knowledge and the tools that I needed to just find my way. And that's I mean, I think that's the great thing about all teachers is they help you, they just help you become who you need to be.
I think you answered this already, but what kind of printer for vellum?
I print on the Epson P800.
Is the gold leaf necessary, or could you simply use a reflective foil or paint?
You could. I mean, you could. I liked the. I mean, I mean, you could actually. I mean, I've done a few of these vellum prints with just putting gesso back behind it.
Mhm.
But that gold leaf is I don't know. There's like a it's like a precious metal, and it just really enhances. I think that
Mhm.
image.
I didn't want to interrupt you, and someone else is reminding me, but Dr. Nancy Siegel of Towson University is who co-curated Remember the Ladies, that exhibition.
Oh yeah.
So, um, you started out photographing people. Do you think of the trees as your subject, or do you think of them as self-portraits?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, they're more as my subjects because I mean they replace the people and my images. And trees have human qualities and they have relationships with other trees and so yeah, I consider them my subjects.
Have you ever photographed the area around the Jones Falls Mill District? Um,
No,
Whitehall Mill
no, I have.
and
I mean, I
it's
walk back there quite a bit.
Mhm.
I live close to, I'm close to the mill center, so I do a lot of walking on Stony Run, which is cuts right through and um, it cuts through Lyman Park and through Boland Park, and it's a really amazing little place.
How many prints of a specific image do you usually print?
I usually do editions of 10.
Have you ever read The Hidden Life of Trees?
Yes, I have. I love that book.
Would you consider printing these on a really big scale?
I've been asked that recently. The Are you referring to the title Dreams images? Because I was
Uh,
asked recently, and the title Dreams, I think those I really like small, and the reason why is that place is like this little tiny treasure, and so I wanted to create these like little jewel-like prints. So in a way, no, but some of the, I mean, the other work I have printed definitely larger.
mhm. Um, Now, I was wondering that too about the printing scale of the images. I think we've ended our questions from our audience, and I want to thank the audience for participating. And I want to thank you again, Karen. The images are really stunning, and um, it's hard to know sometimes whether they're paintings or photographs. It sort of shimmers between them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are saying thank you and beautiful work. And we're really pleased that you provided this lecture. And again, we will be posting the lecture on the Center for the Arts Gallery website under the exhibition that's in the gallery right now, which is Norwegian and American 19th century landscape photography. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.
And thank you, Karen.
Thanks
And
very much.
okay, goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.